It's the prison movie that almost looked completely different, with secret cameos, near-miss casting choices, and clues you've probably never spotted. These are 20 jaw-dropping facts about the Shawshank Redemption that even die-hard fans have missed. And the last one might blow your mind. Number 20. Tom Cruise. Almost played Andy before Tim Robbins quietly etched Andy Dufresne into movie history. The role was a hot commodity in Hollywood. Tom Cruise was heavily courted for the part, with Tom Hanks and Kevin Costner also in the mix. At the time, Cruz was at the peak of his star power, and studios thought his name could help sell a prison drama to mainstream audiences. But there was a catch. Cruz reportedly wasn't fully convinced by a first-time feature director like Frank Darabont, and his hesitation gave room for other actors to step in. When Tim Robbins auditioned, his understated intensity and ability to convey deep thought without a single line of dialogue became impossible to ignore. He wasn't just playing Andy. He was Andy. That subtle, almost invisible realism Robbins brought to the role carried through in the smallest details. And one of those details, hidden in plain sight throughout the film, is something most viewers have never picked up on. Number 19. The clue was right on Andy's face. If you look closely in certain scenes, Andy's exhaustion isn't just acting, it's real. Those dark circles under his eyes, they weren't the work of a makeup artist. Robbins had them naturally during filming because many scenes were shot late at night, and he often worked long back-to-back days on set. For Frank Darabont, it was a happy accident. The tired, hollow-eyed look perfectly fit Andy's secret double life. The man who seemed calm by day, but was chipping away at a concrete wall in the dead of night. That faint shadow under his eyes became a silent clue to the audience, hinting that something more was going on behind those cell bars. It's the kind of detail most viewers miss on the first watch, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it's far from the only thing in the movie that differs from Stephen King's original vision, because the Shawshank we know today went through some surprising changes before it hit the big screen. Number 18. There were slight modifications. When Frank Darabont adapted Stephen King's novella, he didn't just transfer the story word for word. He made small but powerful changes that gave the Shawshank Redemption a stronger emotional punch on screen. Certain character backstories were expanded, pacing was restructured, and entire sequences were reimagined to keep the tension building. One of the biggest changes came at the very end. In King's original novella, the story closes with Red simply hoping to find Andy, leaving the reunion ambiguous. Darabont felt audiences needed closure after such a long emotional journey, so he added the now iconic beach reunion scene in Zihuatanejo. It's a moment so satisfying that many fans can't imagine the story ending any other way. But these tweaks weren't made lightly. Every change had to serve the story's emotional core, and sometimes that meant changing who was telling the story. And that brings us to one of the most unexpected casting shifts in the entire film. Number 17. Brad Pitt said no to Shawshank. In the early casting stages, the role of Tommy, the young charismatic inmate who becomes a turning point in Andy's story, was offered to none other than Brad Pitt. At the time, Pitt was an up-and-coming star fresh off Thelma and Louise, and his name alone could have brought a surge of attention to the film. But Hollywood is all about timing. Pitt had already committed to Interview with the Vampire, a high-profile project with Tom Cruise that was set to dominate the box office. He turned Shawshank down, and the role went to Gil Bellows. While Bellows wasn't as famous, his sincere, almost naive portrayal of Tommy gave the character a vulnerability that might have been lost with a bigger, more polished star. It's one of those what-if moments in film history. But Pitt wasn't the only major player who almost changed Shawshank forever. In fact, behind the camera, there was nearly an entirely different vision for the movie. Number 16. Another name. Behind the movie. While Frank Darabont's vision ultimately defined the Shawshank Redemption, the film almost landed in the hands of another big name, Rob Reiner. At the time, Reiner was fresh off directing hits like A Few Good Men and Misery, and he was eager to adapt Stephen King's story himself. Reiner even had a completely different cast in mind. His version would have featured Harrison Ford as Red and Tom Cruise as Andy, a pairing that would have given the film a more traditional Hollywood blockbuster feel. The deal came close to happening, but Darabont held on to the rights, determined to direct it himself, even if it meant taking a big gamble as a first-time feature filmmaker. That decision shaped the movie into the intimate, character-driven masterpiece we know today. And while the cast and crew were central to its success, the locations also became iconic, with one rural spot in Ohio turning into a pilgrimage site for fans. Number 15. The farm that became a landmark. Many of Shawshank's most memorable outdoor scenes were filmed at Malabar Farm in Ohio, a picturesque stretch of countryside that became an unexpected piece of movie history. The quiet farmland, rolling hills, and weathered barns provided the perfect backdrop for Andy and Red's conversations about life beyond prison walls. One location in particular became legendary, the very field where Andy tells Red to find a rock that has no earthly business in a Maine hayfield. Fans from around the world now travel there just to stand in the same spot, recreating the moment before Red's journey to freedom. Local tourism groups even offer Shawshank location tours, turning the once sleepy farmland into a pop culture destination. For director Frank Darabont, filming there wasn't just about beauty, it was about emotional weight. And that feeling of "this is the moment" wasn't limited to the actors. It's exactly how Darabont felt during one specific scene that convinced him the movie would work. Number 14. The day Darabont knew. He had the film. Every director has that one moment during production where everything clicks. For Frank Darabont, it came during the Mexico Wall conversation, the scene where Andy plants the idea of freedom in Red's mind. Filmed on a breezy Ohio afternoon, the chemistry between Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman was so effortless, so honest, that Darabont knew he was capturing something timeless. He later said that watching Robbins deliver Andy's quiet determination while Freeman countered with Red's hardened skepticism felt like watching two master craftsmen at work. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was electric. That day, Darabont realized the movie's heart wasn't just in the big moments of escape and revelation, but in the quiet exchanges between two men sharing hope in the unlikeliest of places. It was a turning point in filming. But unfortunately, when the movie finally hit theaters, the reaction wasn't what anyone expected. Number 13. Shawshank was a box office flop. When The Shawshank Redemption debuted in 1994, it didn't storm the box office. It limped. Despite strong reviews, audiences largely ignored it in theaters, and the movie actually lost money during its initial run. For a film that would later be hailed as one of the greatest ever made, it was a crushing start. There were plenty of theories about why. Some blamed the lengthy title, which didn't exactly scream must-see. Others pointed to stiff competition that year. Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump dominated audiences' attention. Whatever the reason, Shawshank's early numbers suggested it might quietly fade into obscurity. But just like Andy Dufresne, the movie refused to die in that cell. Through VHS rentals, cable television, and word of mouth, Shawshank slowly became a cultural phenomenon, which makes Stephen King's early decision about the movie's rights even more legendary. Number 12. Stephen King gave the check back. When Frank Darabont first approached Stephen King for the rights to adapt Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, King agreed to sell them for just $5,000. A symbolic gesture, more than a business deal. For a writer of King's stature, it was a remarkably generous move, especially for a first-time feature director. But the generosity didn't stop there. Years later, King returned the check to Darabont uncashed, with a note that read, "In case you ever need bail money." It was both a joke and a statement of trust, proof that King believed in Darabont's vision enough to waive payment entirely. That trust paid off. Darabont took the project seriously, even turning down another King adaptation he already had in his pocket, a decision that would alter his career path. Number 11. Darabont had a horror story in his pocket. Before diving into The Shawshank Redemption, Frank Darabont already had the rights to another Stephen King story, The Mist. It was a tense, claustrophobic horror tale he knew could make for a gripping film. But when the opportunity to adapt Shawshank came along, Darabont made a bold choice. He shelved The Mist and went all in on Andy Dufresne's story. It was a risky move for a first-time feature director. Horror films often have built-in audiences, while prison dramas are a tougher sell. But Darabont believed Shawshank's themes of hope and redemption had a timeless quality that would outlast any short-term box office boost. Ironically, years later, Darabont would return to The Mist, directing it in 2007. But it's safe to say that choosing Shawshank first was the decision that cemented his place in cinematic history, even if some people couldn't quite pronounce its name. Number 10. nobody knew how to say the title. It might be one of the most recognizable movie titles today, but during production, The Shawshank Redemption left people scratching their heads. Crew members, studio executives, and even early audiences stumbled over the name, calling it everything from Shawshank to Scrimshaw Redemption. Not exactly the kind of snappy title that sticks in your memory after seeing a trailer. Some believe this confusion actually hurt the movie's marketing. Word of mouth is hard to spread when people can't remember how to say the title, let alone spell it. Even Stephen King admitted that the name was a mouthful, but insisted it matched the tone and setting of the story. Despite the awkwardness, the title stuck, and over time, it became inseparable from the film's identity. And for the cast, that identity stayed with them long after the cameras stopped rolling. Number 9. The role still followed them for Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman. The Shawshank Redemption wasn't just another job. It was a defining moment in their careers. Robbins, inspired by the film's message and his time on set, went on to teach acting classes in real prisons, bringing the art form to inmates who connected deeply with the story. Freeman's performance as Red also left a lasting mark. His calm, deliberate narration became so iconic that it opened the door to an entirely new line of work: voiceovers. From documentaries to commercials, Freeman's voice became shorthand for wisdom and trust, in large part thanks to Shawshank. Their post-film journeys proved just how powerful these roles were, but the magic of Shawshank didn't just come from the cast. In fact, the script itself was so strong that it won over its leads almost instantly. Number 8. The script was so good. When Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman first read Frank Darabont's screenplay, there was no hesitation. They both signed on almost immediately. The pacing, the dialogue, and the emotional weight of the story jumped off the page, making it clear this wasn't just another prison drama. Darabont's adaptation was faithful to Stephen King's novella, but also bold in the ways it diverged. One of the biggest changes was the ending. In the book, Red's search for Andy is left unresolved. Darabont chose to reunite the two men on a sunlit beach, giving audiences a final moment of catharsis that still ranks among cinema's most satisfying endings. That commitment to emotional payoff ran through the entire production, even down to the smallest visual details. And one of those details came in the form of a blink-and-you-miss-it cameo from someone very close to Morgan Freeman. Number 7. The mugshot was his real son. In Shawshank, we get a brief glimpse of a younger Red in his prison file. A small but memorable moment. What most viewers don't realize is that the face in that mugshot isn't Morgan Freeman in makeup. It's his real-life son, Alfonso Freeman. Alfonso didn't just pose for a photo. He actually appeared on set in a few subtle background moments, including as an inmate who delivers one of the laundry lines. It was a quiet nod to family, and a way for Freeman to bring a personal connection into the role without distracting from the story. It's one of those Easter eggs you'd never know about unless someone told you. Just like the unusual rule the crew had to follow for one very specific scene involving a worm. Number 6. Using a worm that died of natural causes. One of the film's most touching moments comes when Brooks feeds a worm to his pet crow, Jake. But what you see on screen wasn't as simple as grabbing any worm from the ground. The American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals had strict rules. No live animals could be harmed. And yes, that included worms. This meant the prop department had to find a worm that had died of natural causes just to make the shot. It's the kind of behind-the-scenes detail that seems absurd at first, but it shows how much care went into every frame of the movie, even for a moment that lasts just a few seconds. That attention to detail extended far beyond props. In fact, one of the film's most important characters wasn't supposed to look or sound anything like the version we saw on screen. Number 5. Morgan Freeman wasn't supposed to be Red. In Stephen King's original novella, Red was an Irishman, a white, red-haired inmate whose nickname made perfect sense. When Frank Darabont began casting, he opened the role to any actor who could embody Red's wisdom and warmth, and Morgan Freeman's audition left no doubt. The script even kept the "maybe it's because I'm Irish" joke as a wink to the original description. Freeman's deep voice and commanding yet compassionate presence redefined the character entirely. He brought a gravitas that grounded the story, making Red not just Andy's friend, but the film's soulful narrator. It's hard to imagine anyone else guiding us through Shawshank's walls with that same mix of cynicism and hope. And it's fitting, because the movie itself has taken on a kind of immortal life. In fact, it's become one of the most replayed films in US television history. Number 4. The Shawshank Redemption became the movie that wouldn't quit. Most movies fade from the spotlight after their theatrical run, but The Shawshank Redemption has done the exact opposite. Over the years, it has become one of the most replayed films in US television history, airing so often that it's almost impossible to flip through cable channels without stumbling across Andy and Red. This constant exposure turned Shawshank into a comfort watch for millions. People who had never seen it in theaters discovered it on TV, and fans who already loved it found themselves rewatching it again and again. It's one of those rare films that's just as powerful the 10th time as it is the first. But that kind of staying power might never have happened if the movie had kept its original title, one that left audiences completely confused. Number 3. The original name could have caused problems. Stephen King's novella wasn't called The Shawshank Redemption. Its full title was Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, and that created a big problem during early marketing. Some people thought the film was going to be a Rita Hayworth biopic, expecting a glamorous Hollywood drama instead of a gritty prison story. The misunderstanding was so common that Darabont and the studio worried it might hurt ticket sales. While the Rita Hayworth part worked perfectly in the context of the story, especially with the iconic poster, they knew it might mislead audiences. Dropping her name from the title was a simple but crucial change. That small adjustment helped clear up confusion, but not everything in Shawshank was make-believe. In fact, the prison itself was very real, and it came with some surprising extras. Number 2. The prison was real. Unlike many Hollywood productions that rely on elaborate sets, The Shawshank Redemption was filmed inside a real, decommissioned prison, the Ohio State Reformatory. Its crumbling walls, echoing cell blocks, and oppressive atmosphere gave the movie an authenticity that no soundstage could replicate. To make the world of Shawshank feel even more genuine, Darabont brought in former guards who had actually worked at the facility to appear as extras. Their familiarity with the environment helped the prison scenes feel lived in and believable, right down to the smallest gestures and routines. But the truth is, the story's roots go even deeper than the walls of that prison, all the way back to one of Stephen King's most unexpected literary collections. Number 1. The movie was part of a Stephen King book. Many people assume The Shawshank Redemption was a standalone novel, but it actually came from Stephen King's 1982 collection, Different Seasons. The book contained 4 novellas, each tied to a different time of year, and Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption represented spring, a season of hope and rebirth. The other 3 stories in the collection were Apt Pupil, The Body, which became the movie Stand By Me, and The Breathing Method. All were proof that King could write gripping drama without relying on supernatural horror. It's part of what made Shawshank's emotional impact so surprising for audiences who only knew King as the master of horror. From its humble start as one story in a collection to becoming one of the most beloved films of all time, The Shawshank Redemption is living proof that hope and great storytelling can last a lifetime. From near miscasting choices to tiny behind-the-scenes details, The Shawshank Redemption is packed with moments that make it more than just a movie. It's a piece of cinematic history. What started as a modest Stephen King novella became a cultural touchstone, replayed, rewatched, and rediscovered by millions over the decades. Whether it's the real prison walls, the unplanned clues in Robin's performance, or the legendary twist of fate that brought Morgan Freeman to the role of Red, every fact adds a new layer to a story we thought we already knew. So the next time you watch The Shawshank Redemption, look a little closer. You might just spot the details that make this film truly timeless. Which fact surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories from behind the camera.